everybody. This is Dr. Neha Chaudhary, and I'm here with my teen co-host, Hazuri Dhillon. We have an amazing guest for you today on this episode of Being Me, and we're so looking forward to chatting with her. We once again asked our BeMe Teen Advisory Board to submit some questions in advance, and we're super excited to share those with our guest today. So let's meet her. Today, we have Dr. Hina Talib, a board-certified pediatrician and adolescent medicine specialist, writer, and teen media creative based in the New York City area. Dr. Hina, I'd love for you to share more about your background, both personally and professionally. More about what you're doing these days, how you got to where you are, what types of issues you focus on clinically, and then just some about yourself as a person.
Hi. Well, I am so happy to be here to take a moment to talk about teenagers. I consider myself a teen health advocate at heart, and so I just absolutely love the work that you are doing. A little bit about me. So I am a pediatrician and an adolescent medicine specialist, and a lot of people haven't heard of that, but it's basically a pediatrician who specializes in teenagers. So I take care of 11 to, sometimes 24, 25, 26-year-olds, depending on how you want to define adolescence.
Sounds like you're in the right place.
Yeah. And I like to consider myself a one-stop shop for taking care of any needs that a teenager or young adult might have. So including, of course, physical as a pediatrician, but also including mental health and wellness, as that is just so very important in this age group. And I think I just have a very soft spot or a big sense of nostalgia for my own teenage years. Yeah. And I love everything related to teen media. I love teen YA novels. I love all the movies. And I think I just really enjoy the spark, the promise, the future, and the hope that adolescents and young adults bring to everything these days. And I just want to be part of the support to help them achieve their own goals. So that's a little bit about me.
I love that. What a background. I'm so happy that we get to spend a little bit of time with you. And there's clearly a lot to talk about. So let's talk. First and foremost, Dr. Hina, what are you seeing in your clinical practice these days? What seems to be top of mind for teens right now when it comes to their health? And I'd love to also focus on any changes or shifts that you've noticed since before the pandemic through now.
I think that adolescent health is having a renaissance. There were always things that made going through your teenage years challenging and exciting, frankly. And teenagers always needed support. And even before the pandemic, we noticed that there are challenges. Puberty can be a little bit tricky. However exciting it is to have your body change, it can also be a little tricky. And
I feel like little is an understatement.
Yes, absolutely. It can be weird, quite frankly. But, there's so much else that happens in puberty that revolve around your social worlds and how you develop into your own and come into your own. I think there were challenges before the pandemic, but now people are paying attention because adolescents were home with their families and out of school. It was just more in people's faces that, hey, here we are and we have needs. And when we're going through a pandemic, those needs become more visible. And in a way, I think that is a silver lining, that we are paying more attention to the needs of young people as they're coming into their own. But yes, certainly the pandemic, I think, drew back the curtains on mental health challenges, especially. And so there's a lot more attention on that now.
Definitely. It's hard to overlook, right? The American Academy of Pediatrics and American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry declared youth mental health a national emergency. So I think things have just gone to the point where, to your point, the silver lining is that we can't ignore it anymore. We have to do something about it. We need to start talking about it. We need to start addressing it. So I appreciate your bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's high time, but really, we already know the problem is there. And I love to focus on, okay, what's the next step? What can we do to actually help young people today? Because we can't just talk about it being the crisis that it is. We need some steps forward.
Yep. Like, where to from here? What do we do about it?
Yeah, definitely. We had a lot of questions from the Teen Advisory Board about eating disorders. First of all, can you share with us some examples of different eating disorders?
Oh, I love that you're bringing this up, because this has really been something that we who take care of teenagers have noticed increasing during the pandemic. Eating disorders. And a lot of people don't know what they are or don't even know how to categorize it. Is it a mental health condition, or is it a physical condition, or is it something to do with your gut? Like, people just don't know. And so eating disorders, it's actually a mental health condition with some very serious physical effects stemming largely from malnutrition. And because they have been increasing in the last, 2 years now, it is so very important that we talk about it, that we break the stigma around eating disorders and educate people so they can kind of be on the lookout for it, so we can help people earlier in their course rather than later.
What are some early signs and symptoms to look for so that you can stop it earlier on? And are any of these signs more or less obvious?
Yeah, so eating disorders are notorious for hiding themselves. The disorder doesn't necessarily want to be discovered. So it's good to look for signs or to talk about signs and share signs with families and friends and peers so that people know what to look out for. Of course, something that might be obvious is weight loss. But again, sometimes it's not so obvious because you might find a young person who wears bigger clothes so that their weight loss isn't as easily noticed. But you might also notice, besides just weight loss, you might notice changes in eating behavior. All of a sudden, they change what they eat. So they had always potentially eaten different food groups, but they might decide that they have become a vegetarian or a vegan, and in terms of how they eat. And that's not necessarily pathological, but if it's a sudden change and it's in the situation where you're also noticing other things, then it might be cause for alarm. You might notice a teen who talks a lot about or worries a lot about food or changes. They used to come to family meals, but they don't anymore. Something that is very alarming or could be very alarming is if they run to the bathroom after meals and you see it consistently. Of course, skipping meals or not coming to meals at all. And they did that before. Those would be other kind of signs to look out for.
That makes sense. Those are some really clear signs and concrete examples. I appreciate your mentioning those. I'm wondering actually if we could dig in a little bit more on this line between what's normal versus not. So one thing that came up from some of the teens that had questions was, how can you parse out whether it's an eating disorder or whether it's just a quirky relationship with food or whether they're on a diet that's healthy for them? So when, in a more nuanced way, is it time to seek professional help? And then where can you actually start in finding that help?
So what a great question. And I think that I'd like to start off by saying there's really no good reason for a developing young person to be on a diet. Diets are kind of the gateway drug to having concerns or issues with your body. We call it body image issues that can really take hold on your brain and cause you to act out in certain ways. But this idea of quirky eating, I love that question. Like, when is it just quirky and when is it an actual disorder? So let's dig in there. It's an actual disorder when you're losing so much weight that your body is malnourished. And, you can have mild, moderate, or severe malnutrition, but malnutrition causes all sorts of effects in your body. When you're spending a lot of your days, say, preoccupied or thinking about food and eating, maybe you're counting calories, maybe you're weighing yourself, maybe you're just really worried and thinking about what food is going in your mouth or what food is available to you or not available to you. When it kind of basically changes kind of the flow of your day, and the flow of your day revolves around something that adds so much stress and pressure, those are times when I would really consider, hey, maybe this isn't just quirky eating. Maybe this is actually a disorder because it's powerful and it's like the bully in my brain. It's telling me what to do and I don't have that control anymore.
That makes sense. I love that idea of calling it the bully in my brain. I've heard, to what you were just mentioning, I've heard of a lot of teens with some of these symptoms who start restricting their eating, but I've also seen teens who have noticed that, especially during the pandemic, they're eating more than usual and they're eating in a really unhealthy way and they feel bad about themselves or their body. Can you speak a little bit more about some of the eating disorders that have to do with maybe binge eating or that are not necessarily related to weight loss?
Yeah. And so eating disorders do come in all shapes and sizes. And that is an important point because a lot of people don't quite realize that because they have this one idea of an eating disorder in their mind, which is an underweighted young person. And so, yes, you can have eating disorders at larger sizes, and there may be weight loss associated with that for sure. But there are other eating disorders like bulimia nervosa, which you may not have heard about as much as anorexia nervosa, which definitely gets a little bit more like airplay in media and things like that. But for example, with bulimia nervosa, yeah, you may not actually be underweighted at all or have any weight loss associated with it. But you are doing things because, again, the bully in your brain is sort of driving you to do things that can harm yourself, including purging, vomiting, and eating lots of food in a way that just feels a little out of control and then feeling bad about it later, of course.
Are there any common misunderstandings or misconceptions about how eating disorders affect your body? This was another question that we got a lot from the Teen Advisory Board.
I think a common misconception, at least that I hear or feel from families when I work with them, is that it's somehow intentional on the teen's part, or they seem to think that they have more control over it than they do. And so I always like to parse that out as it's certainly not something that a teen is intentionally in terms of it being their fault or in terms of them being in the driver's seat, because they're not. The disorder's in the driver's seat. So that's, I think, a big misconception. In terms of the misconceptions on how it affects their body, I think that sometimes people minimize or don't quite understand the severity of malnutrition. And that's why it's important to have a pediatrician or an adolescent medicine doc as part of your team, as part of your whole eating disorder team, because we're here to make sure that there are guardrails up when it comes to your nutrition. So very serious things can happen, like it can affect the electrophysiology or the way your heart beats, which is not good. It can affect the way your hormones are functioning in your body. It can affect, if you're a teen who has periods, it can affect that. It can affect everything from your hair to your skin. And the worst part about malnutrition, which ends up becoming very cyclical with the eating disorder part of it, is that it affects your brain. Your brain literally cannot function when it is malnourished, which makes it very hard to fight that bully in the brain. And so food becomes medicine. I think sometimes people don't quite understand the truth of that piece of it, but food is medicine when it comes to it.
That's such a good point that when it affects your brain, it becomes harder to use your brain to fight it. And just kind of keeping an eye on that last line you said, that food is medicine in these cases, is so important. I wanted to ask you something a little bit different. So the media seems to focus on girls and body image and social media, but these issues around body image also impact boys, right? And people who don't identify specifically as female. Do you see this playing out in your own practice with adolescent boys or with other genders? And what advice do you have for the broader population of teens on social media who might find themselves also struggling with body image and or even muscle dysphoria?
So full disclosure, I spend way too much time on Instagram. I somehow found myself as a medfluencer. and so you
have so much great content. It's so educational.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. So I am at Teen Health Doc on Instagram, but I see it. It's there. There are so many reasons why you might fall into traps of comparing yourself and comparing your bodies, because folks share it and it is so altered and filtered and it can make you feel bad. And heck, it makes me feel bad. I'm supposed to be helping other people. And so I think that it can be a very tricky place. And it's very good to just be aware of who you're following and what they're putting out there and what they're calling out and how, be critical of it. Like, how real is this image that they're sharing? And do they actually share about their own body image issues, perhaps, if they're sharing a lot of content that's very body specific or exercise specific, diet specific? What's their end game? What might they be selling or projecting? Or why might they be doing this? So I encourage people to be a little critical about influencers that they might see who are young people themselves, but who are putting out this content into the social sphere.
It totally makes sense.
What do you normally tell teens about body image? What's important for us to know?
I think that it's important for us to be body positive, and it's important to do that from young ages. And I would much rather be very proactively body positive, which is why I think it's important to talk to families together and not just sort of specifically target a young person after they're having a hard time with the importance of body image work. So I think prevention is really important. I think talking about it in families, at schools, in communities is really important, that, hey, we're body positive. And what does that mean? That means that we cultivate a world where we celebrate and uplift people of all sizes, and we celebrate our body for what it does for us and not necessarily how it looks. And there are ways to do this, of course, and there's lots of advice out there. But I also think that puberty is a very challenging time sometimes because your body is changing and it's not in your control. And so I think it's really important to be very body positive and very intentional about that for young people who are embarking on this process of puberty. And I think it's important to let them know that, hey, different people, meaning and your friends, bodies will change at different paces.
Sure.
And letting everybody know that's normal because it's natural to compare. So first of all, it's a little bit alarming that your body is changing. And then you're like seeing everybody else's body change.
Yeah.
So I think that it's an important time to talk about how it all kind of fits in and how body changes are normal.
What are some ways that teens can cultivate a positive body image?
I think, again, just being aware and being very positive about people who come in different shapes and sizes. I think being kind to yourself and being kind to your body and being kind to your body's strengths. What does your body do for you? It helps you move. It helps you play sports. You kind of measure yourself based on different milestones that you're hitting with your body. And so I think being kind to yourself and being kind to your body and less critical and less comparing a little bit less. But the problem is that's also just human nature. And it's also a very normal part of being a teenager is to compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
And so I think when you are comparing yourself, just call yourself out. Oh, I'm comparing myself. Why am I doing that? Why am I putting that pressure on myself? And being critical of when you see it in media would be my biggest pieces of advice.
I like that. I think it's so important, as you said, to kind of focus on the function of your body, what it's doing for you. And then when you notice that you are comparing yourself, to also have self-compassion, to acknowledge it for what it is. Say, okay, I'm comparing myself to others. Do I need to be right now? How can I kind of reframe this thought to myself? How can I be kinder to myself? How can I show gratitude for what my body's doing for me? I really like that.
Oh, gratitude is a good one. I'm glad you mentioned that. Absolutely.
It reminds me of another question, which is, again, linking this idea of body image back to what we were talking about earlier with eating disorders. Do all eating disorders have to do with body image, or is it broader or deeper than that? I feel like I've seen a lot of teens in my practice say that they started noticing a flare in some of their eating disorder symptoms when they felt like things around them were out of control. Have you noticed that as well? I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that control is a very important part of eating disorders and probably really an important part of a lot of mental health conditions, because when you feel out of control or when you feel stressed, if you already have or had a challenge, it may flare up, as you were saying before. And so those are times in your life when, if you have depression or anxiety or an eating disorder, when you're facing another stress or challenge like finals week or a move or a change in your family structure, you may be on the lookout. Hey, maybe this mental health condition that I have might flare up. And so I think it's an important point, and it's okay to talk about it and be proactive about it. Hey, I might need to be a little bit on guard about the way I'm nourishing my body this month because I know that I'm stressed about X, Y, or Z other things.
I love that idea of proactively looking for kind of your own warning signs, right? Like when you might be headed down that path and recognizing what those are.
Yeah, you know yourself best and you're your own best advocate. I call myself a teen health advocate, but hey, you as a young person are the most important voice in your head. And so if you can get good about picking up your own warning signs, then lean into that. And I fully support taking your lead, actually.
I'd love to switch gears to something that's really been on the top of mind for a lot of teens. There's so much health information and disinformation online in our social media feeds. And we know you're a social media expert. So what are some tips that can help teens evaluate the credibility of online health resources?
I think really developing what we call media literacy, which is developing the skills around being critical and making judgments for yourself around media, is a really important skill to practice, to talk about. And it can be really empowering when you're looking at media to train yourself or teach yourself to not take it at face value and to think about what are their motives? What is the bias? What's the upside for them in sharing this? And it may be when it comes to influencers that, hey, there is a monetary component to what they're sharing, or it may be that they have products that they're trying to have you buy or sell or things like that. So I think being critical, calling it out, talking about it is important. And I think the second thing I would say is diversify your online presence or feeds. Whatever media you're consuming, intentionally, take a look at it and pick it apart a little bit and make sure that it is diverse and that it reflects things that show you different aspects to life. So you're not just looking at kind of the same thing, because if you're just looking at the same thing over and over again, and it isn't necessarily the greatest content, it may actually make you not feel so good. Oh, and I guess the last thing that I would add is if it doesn't make you feel good, if any content or media or influencer or platform is not making you feel good, unfollow, delete, and leave it. And I think that sometimes we don't do that enough. We sort of just let this stuff go in the background, but you should just click unfollow if it doesn't feel good.
I love that. I talked to a lot of teens about just having a sense of self-agency around this so they can make active choices about how they're using social media. So if they notice that content's making them feel worse, to unfollow, to block it, and then to start filling their feed with stuff that leaves them feeling well, because they do have that control. Before we go, Dr. Hina, I wanted to ask you if you have any general advice for teens. So it could be advice about their health, about their mental health. It could be unrelated. But what would you like teens to know or to keep in mind before you go?
I would love to let teens know to listen to themselves, to listen to the voice in their head, listen to their heart, listen to kind of how they feel as they're approaching challenges or opportunities, and to verbalize it, to let other people know what you need. Sometimes we keep that to ourselves, but it's okay to let people around you, including your parents, your teachers, your coaches. It's okay and good to say, I need, and then let them know what you need, because it actually really helps the people who are there, who want to care for you, to meet you where you know, how you need it. And I feel like sometimes young people, you know, I might ask them that and they might say, nobody's asked me that before. Nobody's asked me how I want to be helped. So I think go out there and really ask for what you need, because there are people in your lives who care about you, but they may not know the best way to go about it or the way that you need them to be there for you. So I would definitely say, ask for what you need and take it, because you're so very important.
It's so important. I feel like the first part of it is almost finding your voice as a teen, right? You're in that stage of life where you're probably starting to develop or get a sense of who you are, what you stand for, what you believe, what you want, what you need. And then the second part is advocating for yourself. I mean, you're talking about asking for what you need, making it known. I think that's just so important. I really appreciate your sharing that.
You're so very welcome.
Yeah, this was really great. Once again, there was a lot to talk about. And thank you so much, Dr. Hina, for joining us on Being Me.
Thank you so much. This was a really great chat. Until next time, this is Dr. Neha Chaudhary reminding you to keep being you.